Welcome to the AFGHANEYE YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, make sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our new videos. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another AFGHANEYE Live. I'm your host Sangar Paikar.
And I am ahmed-waleed Kakar.
Guys, it's been a while, but we're back. Hope everyone is doing well. For those of you who are celebrating Christmas and having your holidays, I hope you have enjoyed your holidays. We are going to discuss a couple of stories, latest news from Afghanistan, plus some more important matters such as the OIC conference. But first of all, I would like to ask everyone in the chat, please share the link, invite everyone as much as you can to that we can discuss the most important stories in Afghanistan today. And by the end of the show, you can then ask questions and we will take your questions from the chat. And last but not least, don't forget to like the video, guys. Okay, so
Before we start, share it on your social media. Sangar, let's just give it two or so minutes for everyone else to join in as well.
Okay. How you been doing, Waleed? How's everything?
Alhamdulillah, I've been doing well. It's Christmas. Whilst I don't celebrate Christmas, it means we're off from work, so it's a pretty quiet few days. And you and I both agreed, for everyone that's watching, Sangar and I both agreed, as I'll be traveling tomorrow for about a week, it'll be a good idea to do a live stream, partially because we haven't done one for about a week and a half, and we don't want to leave it for 2 or 3 weeks as we've done before. So there's a lot that has happened in that week and a half. I'm sure you'd agree, from OIC conferences to the United Nations easing aid, the United Nations easing the passage of aid into Afghanistan. There's been a letter written to President Biden by about 47 congressmen in America arguing for help with the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. You have clashes along the Durand Line with Pakistan, especially in Kunar. And now you have the subject of today's live stream, which is restrictions or, measures being taken against beardless men, the playing of music in vehicles, and women without hijab. So that's the background of today's live stream. I noticed there are about 20 people here and not nearly as many likes, which is the cause of enduring anguish for me. So please share the video, guys. Like the video and share it on your social medias, because once we get a certain number of people here, we're then going to be starting.
Yes, and Mr. Morris in the chat is saying that in a couple of days it's going to be the birthday of most of the people in Afghanistan, because it's the 1st of January. It's also the birthday of many people from Somalia and many other Muslim countries, because on their passports, especially in Western countries, it always says date of birth 1st of January or 1st of July. So yes, that's absolutely correct. Robika Habib Dera Manana Kormuadan, she just said that she subscribed and retweeted. Thank you very much.
There's a Autumn Smartphone is saying Chand Meti ke subscribe kalam.
Yak dua barat meikunim.
Inshallah.
Okay, guys. So yeah, any questions so far in the chat? No, I don't see any questions. Abu Bakr Ahmed says, this is the first time I'm joining you guys live. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you with us, new people joining us during the live stream. I hope you enjoy while being with us. Waleed, quick question. So did you actually read the statement or the guidance for taxi drivers that we're going to discuss later. Have you actually read it?
I have. Yes,
Okay.
I have.
Okay. So I would like to ask you to translate the whole text.
Okay.
All right.
Let me open it up now.
Yeah. Can you quickly read it and so that you can? Yes.
Okay. So the Afghanistan
Just not
Islami
right.
Imarat.
Not now. Just in a few minutes. Okay. So
sure.
we will start in about let's say 3 more minutes. Yeah. 3 more minutes. In 3 minutes, I will just go and get myself a drink. Okay. Michelle says it's suggestion, not requirement. ما چای تریاکی نمیزنیم. Autumn smartphone says یک چای تریاکی دم کو. Bint Said says, wish was living in Afghanistan now, honestly, having a hard time practicing Islam to its fullest because of family pressure and my surroundings.
Bint Said, may Allah make that easier for you. Trials and tribulations come in various ways, and in Afghanistan, whilst the spiritual aspect may be more easy to practice, there are other problems. So we hope and we pray that Muslims around the world can find ease, and that is about as much of a Mawlawi as you'll ever hear me getting. Shroik Usangar.
Behi Saida. Okay. So, guys, today's most important story, Waleed, if you can give us a quick breakdown.
Sure. So, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan's Ministry of Promoting Virtue and Preventing Vice has issued the following. How would you translate Tawsiya Sangar? Recommendations, right? And it says that this recommendation is for Motarwananuta, which is basically drivers, but what it's implied here that would be for people, taxi drivers, right? So number one, now the first point is that they actually spell Ghagegi wrong, which indicates that it's a very strong Mashriqi kind of fellow that's written this, because he's spelt it wrong. But in any case,
so Mashriqi cannot spell. Is that what you're trying to say?
No.
I think you're starting off the stream by being very toxic against people of Mashriqi, and I would kindly request you to refrain from that kind of
it's because
unwarranted attacks against people of Mashriqi. Okay, so, continue.
So number two is Beja. So women not wearing the hijab should not be picked up in the car. Number three is so unrelated women should not be picked up in journeys that exceed 45 miles. So number four is intoxicating substances, drugs, alcohol, and so on, should not be utilized in the car. And number five is during prayer time, cars should be stopped and parked in a suitable place in order to fulfill the prayer, to pray. So those are the five tawsiyah or recommendations or suggestions of the Ministry of Promoting Virtue and Preventing Vice. Now, here's the thing: whilst it says these are suggestions or recommendations
Just one
for
second.
drivers,
Just 1 second.
yeah.
The last line, number 6, does it say the gire pabab khalkota tausiye wishi?
Sorry, I actually didn't see that because I'm so zoomed in on the first five,
Yes,
and I
yes.
don't have my glasses.
So number 6 is the gire pabab khalkota tausiye wishi.
Washi. They actually spell Gira wrong as well.
Yes, yes.
So, and it's really bad handwriting, so forgive me. But yeah, so it says regarding the growing of the beard, people should be given advice or suggestions. Again, they should be given tawsiyah. So thanks for pointing that out, Sangar. Like I said, I'm so zoomed in on the first five, I didn't actually see that. So those are the 6 recommendations of that ministry. Now, here's one thing that I found interesting, Sangar. So, you know, when it says music should not be played and women should not be picked up if they don't have a hijab or if they're traveling alone exceeding 45 miles. But then in point 4, it says that the usage of intoxicating substance, bandi, which goes beyond a suggestion or a friendly recommendation, and it just says they are banned, right?
Yes.
There's no it's better not to use this, or Islamically this isn't good. It's bandi, for those that don't understand Pashto, is much more authoritative than saying women should not be picked up, because should would imply some level of choice. And now this has caused a lot of controversy on the Afghan political spectrum, especially on Twitter. There was actually one tweet that was written by Harun Rahimi, who was a professor at professor of law, I believe, at the American University of Afghanistan. And I'm going to send you that tweet now as well, Sangar, because I found it an interesting perspective, which we can discuss. So
yes.
That tweet is here.
Okay, thank you. We're going to check Harun's tweet. Here we go. Yes, okay. So Professor Harun Rahimi is saying Taliban have deputized taxi drivers to police Afghan women's bodies and mobility. This will create opportunities for harassment and make public spaces unsafe for women. The Quranic rationale for hijab in Medina! Exclamation point. This flies in the face of what Taliban PR team tells the world and the media. Okay, so first of all, the last line, this flies in the face of what Taliban PR team tells the world and the media. I would say spot on, 100%, because this whole new buzz that has been created because of this new guidelines is basically suggesting that what we were promised or what we heard in the first couple of months of the Taliban regime, that they will not infringe upon people's, private matters and blah, blah, blah. Now, I would say this new, I don't even know how to describe this. Is this a proposition? Is this a suggestion? Is this a new law? Because it is quite complicated. Why?
There's also another thing that I want to add here as well, is that there's a practically it's very nonsensical for these recommendations or suggestions to be given to taxi drivers. First of all, like Harun Rahimi has pointed out, the Taliban have deputized taxi drivers to basically carry out the law on the ministry's behalf. Okay, fair enough. Now, the first question comes, on which legal basis do those taxi drivers do that? And secondly, why would a taxi driver deny himself a possible passenger at a time of economic hardship because the woman is not wearing hijab? Do you see what
Yes,
I'm saying?
and just one other point. Okay, so this new statement comes from the Ministry of Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. Something that I have been investigating and asking around for the last couple of days about this ministry is that this ministry is not a executioner of the law, in the sense that it is not like the Ministry of Interior. It's not a police force, so they have no authority imposing anything on people. They cannot go and arrest people. This ministry does not have that kind of duties. Their only duty is to promote certain values and advise people against certain practices. And whenever there are complaints about the government, the authorities, the police, and all other institutions, you can go and file a complaint at this ministry. So those are the duties of this ministry. I know there is a lot of confusion online, and all these journalists who are so-called Afghanistan experts, they talk about this, but they do not know what is the duty of this ministry and other ministries. So whenever they have some kind of statement or some kind of proposal coming from this ministry, there needs to be a direct link to the law enforcement to say that this is actually a law that is being currently imposed and sanctioned, and you know, like, people can be punished and etc. because of that. That is not the case.
If you remember our previous guest, Roshan Mohammed Saleh, he actually spoke to the Ministry of Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, and they said our job is basically dawat and irshad,
Yes.
invitation and guidance. We're not sort of backed by coercive power. And Zabiullah Mujahid is also saying that. I remember it was in an interview with the journalist from Channel 4 News. He was saying that in the 90s, the situation was different. We had to be much more punitive and harsh, but now we are going to be much softer in recommending certain things to people. And certain things, for those that don't know or for whom it may be vague, is to encourage people to act in line with what the government sees as religious propriety. But like I said, this is the fact that the Ministry of Prevention of Vice and the Promotion of Virtue is saying the use of drugs in cars is banned, right? Together as part of suggestions, it leaves some sort of vagueness. Now, in the chat, Sangar, Slicky Villi is saying the free world enforces masks and vaccines. That's true, but two wrongs don't really make a right. Oh, I just let it be known that I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist with the masks and vaccine stuff. No, I'm not. I'm joking. But the point is that there needs to be more clarity with regard to what this is. There needs to be an understanding. Like I said, primarily the main issue Afghanistan is confronted with at the moment is this economic crisis. Now, if you're a taxi driver looking to provide for your family, are you now supposed to reject potential clients because they're not dressed appropriately according to the ministry itself? It's not really the best thing. And Harun Rahimi is also saying it also create opportunities for harassment and make public spaces unsafe for women. And that is true, because the taxi driver now is the arbitrator of this law or of this suggestion, which opens up various fields. So the point here is not to, because I know someone is going to come along and accuse us of being against Islamic sort of dress code and whatever. The point isn't that. The point is who is enforcing and implementing this and how. And I think for the time being, I think we've covered that
Yeah,
topic.
just final point is that we have to wonder where the priorities are of the government. Like, for instance, if we talk about as forming a society based on ideals of Islam, what the Taliban believe. Okay, they want a Islamic society, Islamic government, people behaving according to Islamic law. Then, you know, 99% of the people of Afghanistan want Sharia law, according to a research conducted by PEW, the American Research Institute. So the people already agree with Islamic law, etc. So it's not like they are imposing something that people don't want. The problem here is the way they're going about this and how this is creating some sort of backlash. And in my opinion, the problem here is that they do not have set their priorities correctly. As a government, they need to make sure that people feel safe, secure, and that people feel that this government represents them, their best interests. And they haven't achieved that so far. But they do want to tell people how to behave, how to act. And in my opinion, that reveals that they haven't set their priorities correctly and they don't know what they're doing. And this can potentially cause a lot of instability. And, you know, one of the most important matters that any government needs to take care of first and foremost is to obtain the trust of the people. People need to feel like this government represents them. You mentioned masks and the corona pandemic. One of the reasons why so many people in Western countries are believing in conspiracy theories and they do not want to accept all these pandemic-related new restrictions and rules is because they do not trust their government. And this is why there is such a big disconnect between a segment of the society and the government. The same thing applies in Afghanistan. Like Taliban, they have taken over the country 4 or 5 months ago, and in just 4 or 5 months, they haven't achieved to convince everyone that this government is for the people. So obviously, you will have a lot of backlash. And in my opinion, you know, I think, you know, as Afghans, whether we are in Afghanistan or outside Afghanistan, we need to use this opportunity to speak up and say that this is not what we want, and we do not want the government to behave in this manner, because this will create more problems, and we do not want to distract people from most urgent matter, which is the starvation and the famine.
Okay, but I'm gonna challenge you on this, all right? Now, every government has its own associated departments and ministries, right? Now, the Ministry of Prevention of Vice and the Promotion of Virtue, right? This is quite literally their job.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying? So it's not, this doesn't indicate that the government itself is distracted, because everything, so anyone that works within a government bureaucracy will tell you that not everything that is put out in the public sphere goes to the prime minister's or the emir's desk and is signed off or done in consultation with him. This is the job of the ministry itself. So yeah, they'll make mistakes and whatever, but to what extent can we really say that it's indicative?
Yeah, but
of the
here's
government's
the problem. Let's just focus on this ministry. Look, we know that by consensus of the 4 schools of thought in Islam, shaving of the beard is considered as sinful. You can go and look it up. This is the opinion of the majority of Muslim scholars throughout centuries. That's a fact. We know that. We also know that music is haram according to a majority of scholars around the world for the last...
Unfortunately.
Yes. We know that. We also know that hijab for women is a requirement in Islam. Everybody knows that. Even non-Muslims know that. However, if you want to if you want people to accept certain aspects of Islam and live accordingly, you have to focus on what is, amr bil ma'ruf. You need to command them upon what is virtue. And this government in the last 4 or 5 months, I haven't seen that much commanding of virtue, but they are already starting with prevention of vice. So, in my opinion, yes, if that's the job of the ministry.
Okay. But what if I push back and I'm like, everyone is already doing the virtue? The virtuous stuff is already there. This is a predominantly Islamic society. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. You have a point, definitely. Vast majority of people in Afghanistan do not walk around, like women do not walk around without hijab, and vast majority of people do have a beard. I would say that only the music aspect, Afghan Siane, where Afghanan Padol Masti, that's something. But aside from that, I would say it's not really something that is a major concern, a major problem right now.
Sangad, I've got a question for you, and I'm gonna direct it to you because you spoke to people to confirm. Wait, Vlad, masti means fun. Yes, it does. Robika Habib says Sangad Rora wali perde kagaz bandi ya imza nesta aya da waqiat de au kabia ya jali shayde.
روبیکا ما له ډیرو خلکو نه معلومات وکړ او ټول هم دا وایي چې دا اصلي سند ده، یعنی که امضا پې نسته بیا هم د څه نومیږي د وزارت لخوا صادر شوی ده.
Okay.
This document does not have a signature or a stamp. So despite that, when I made an inquiry, I was told that this is officially a document that is being issued by the ministry.
Maybe the guy who wrote it purposely chose not to put his signature because he knew he was going to get roasted. Okay, so that is basically the topic of the restrictions on beardless men, music, and women, and hijabless women. Autumn Smartphone says, I cannot begin my day without listening to Ahmed Zahir. Yeah, well, Ahmed Zahir, his popularity endures. Now, there's another thing that we should discuss,
Ahmed Zahir also made good Islamic songs like Doste Daram, Walla Bila,
Khuda bu Wadiyaret.
Yes, yeah, very Islamic, very.
So, but yeah, I think that was actually released during the communist period.
Yeah,
so
he was trolling the communists with Wallah Billah and Inshallah and Alhamdulillah.
No, I'm talking about Khuda bu Wadiyaret, Sakhi Madadgaret, Quran Nigahdaret, and all of the other lyrics within that song. But there's another topic that I feel we should discuss, and this comes off the bat of the head of security for Panjshir province, Abdulhamid Khorasani, a couple of days ago released a video in which he was accusing the former Minister of Defense, Bismillah Khan Mohammadi, of basically trying to bribe young men in Panjshir to conduct anti-government activity. Now, today or yesterday, a young man has been killed in an altercation with police. I believe the young man has been discovered to have been named Muhammad Agha, but he was killed for all intents and purposes in, let's say, suspicious, murky circumstances. Now, his body has been taken by his family, his close ones, to the provincial chief's office, I believe, who are now, and the crowd is now chanting death to the Taliban. So there are protests in Panjshir, and like I said, that comes off the back of Abdulhamid Khorasani accusing the former Minister of Defense of trying to foment unrest. So Sangat, can we first play the video of Khorasani?
Yes, the video has two parts, so we will go to first.
video tweet link
yeah, but I have the his own page, so.
Okay.
Yes, okay, so let's go. Let me just unmute. Okay,
ما أمة محمد رسول الله سرباز.
Wait, just 1 second. I need to make sure that the audio is playing back. Okay.
هذا إسلام مجاهد است. با افتخار زیر پرچم امارت اسلامی.
Okay. So I'm going to play the video. Guys in the chat, I'm not sure if the audio is playing correctly. So if I press play, let me know if the audio is playing or not.
ما أمة محمد رسول الله سرباز اسلام و مجاهد است. با افتخار زیر پرچم امارت اسلامی خدمت به خلق الله میکنیم. از حقوق مردم خود صادقانه دفاع میکنیم. با قامت بلند. برای هیچ کسی حقم نمیتیم که بالای مردم ما ظلم کند. و هیچ کسی حقم نداره. و هیچ دستوری هم نیست.
Okay, guys in the chat, is the audio? Can you hear the audio? Everything's. Is it audible or not?
I don't think I'm able to hear Khorasani talking.
You cannot hear it? Oh, okay, just 1 second.
No, actually, everyone in the chat is saying that they can.
Okay, so basically, Hamid Khorasani uploaded a video where he is very angry. Abdulhamid Khorasani is chief of security of Panjshir. He used to be a part of the whole Panjshiri thug, the group of guys who are like sort of outlaws in Afghanistan, in Kabul. And before the fall of the government, he pleaded allegiance to the Taliban. And now that the Taliban are basically ruling all over Afghanistan, they have appointed him as head of security in Panjshir because he is a native of Panjshir. And he is quite a controversial person, but Abdulhamid Khorasani, who, by the way, changed his last name to Emirati now. He is.
He also changed his hat from a pakol to the signature black turban.
Yes, and he is basically saying that I am serving the people of Panjshir. I protect the people of Panjshir, and I will do anything within my power to provide for security in Panjshir. And then
امر امیر المؤمنین حفظ الله و امشران ما خلیفه ما حفظ الله کسی که ظلم کنه جنایت گرفتارش میکنه سرکوبش میکنه میذارمش بندیش میکنه.
He says everyone who acts against the Amr, the commands of Amir al-Mu'mineen, so the leader of the Taliban and the government, and I will arrest them, I will prosecute them, I will put them in jail, and I will fight against them. He's talking about the people in Panjshir who are collaborating with NRF.
خراسانی سرخم و بیعزت نیست و تو که میل بغاوت میکنی در برابر حکومت اسلامی برای تو اجازه نمیدم. من مسئول هستم که امنیت مردم.
Turbulence here. I'm going to turn off my camera for about a minute.
Okay, so he's saying that, and I'm not a coward. Basically, he's saying that anyone who's anyone who's involved in rebellion against this Islamic government, he's warning them, and is basically saying that whoever picks up arms and tries to oppose the government militarily, that he's going to act against them.
من مسئول هستم که در برابر کسانی که بغاوت میکنن سرکشی میکنن ناامنی میندازن مردم ناآرام میسازن ما استفاده کنیم.
He's saying that his responsibility is to act against those people who are creating instability, insecurity, and basically disturbing the peace of the people of Panjshir. So his responsibility is to act against such people.
ما باید از کووارا یا اصلاح شوید یا سرکوبتان میکنم. هر کسی که باشه باعث بی‌عزتی و بی‌آبرویی و با مزرع باعث بی‌ناموسی مردم پنشیر شما مقاومتگران شدید.
He's saying that the people who are involved in this armed resistance, they are causing humiliation and damaging the reputation of the people of Panjshir with their actions.
یک مجاهد امارات اسلامی به عزت و آبرو و ناموس مسلمان و پنجشیری دستاندازی نکرده. اینو مطمئن باشید.
He says none of the people of the current government has violated the dignity of the people of Panjshir. You can be sure of that that's not happening.
تو باعث عزیز شدی با تقاطق ناقد، با سر صدای بیجای، با حرکت‌های احمقانه که مردم آواره و بیچاره شدن.
And he's saying that you guys, the ones who are involved in armed opposition, that you guys are causing disturbance because of the disturbance that you're creating. You're basically creating a situation where people may get oppressed or disturbed and harassed.
مردم پنجشیر و مردم افغانستان در سراسر کشور ما مردم مظلوم بیچاره به یک لقمه نان محتاج هستند.
He's saying people of Panjshir, but more generally all across Afghanistan, people are in need of just one, how do you say, logma?
Morsel of food.
Just one morsel of food. People are in desperate need of just one morsel of food in Afghanistan and in Panjshir.
شما تجارت کثیری را که برای انداختید باعث نارامی میشه، باعث بغاوت میشه.
And the dirty business that you have started, it's causing rebellion and disturbance.
باعث تشویش و سرگردانی مردم میشه.
It's causing concern and desperation for people of Afghanistan.
ما صدا داریم، سند داریم، دلیل. مثلا صدای بسم الله خان است.
He says that he has evidence, voice recording of former Minister of Defense Bismillah Khan Mohammadi.
همین چند تا بچه‌ای که در شهر گرگوتی ماین میشوندن.
These few guys in Gurguti area of Panjshir who were planting mines.
برای شرم نیست براتون خجالت بکشین، زهر بخورین، بمیرین.
He says, aren't you ashamed? You should be ashamed. You should drink poison and die out of humiliation for what you're doing.
مزدوران استعمار، چوچه های یهود و نصارا، شما مزدور استعمار بودید، شما دشمنان الله و رسولش بودید.
He's saying you guys are slaves and servants of Jews and Christians, and you guys are basically, so he's insulting Bismillah Mohammadi and people
Not
like him.
very tolerant.
No. Okay, so let's go to the next video, or is this enough?
I think this is enough. Oh yeah, the next video is just of protests. I think it's just good just to show what's actually going on, because if we don't show the other video, then people are going to be, you only showed one and not the other.
Yeah, so this video came out a few days ago, and shortly after this video where he is saying that young men are being offered money. By the way, the piece where he's talking about young people being offered money, let me just quickly show that video. Here we go. So the video where he's telling people that young men are being offered money, poor people are being offered money to go and shoot and plant bombs and everything. That video is the second part of the video that he has uploaded. So yeah, for the guys, if you want to watch it, it's on Twitter. But anyways, let me show you. Oh yeah, here. So let's go to the video of today's protests, okay? So here we go. So today, this morning, there was an incident. A young man called Muhammad Agha from Anaba district of Panjshir was killed. And when he was killed, people started protesting. This is the video. I'm going to enlarge the screen. Here we go. So they were
So
chanting.
what you're hearing,
Yeah, so
what you're hearing is the Islamic testimony of God's greatness, Allahu Akbar, followed by death to the Taliban. Did they say anything after that, Sangar?
yeah, so the death to Taliban, and basically the people in Panjshir, they say that Muhammad Agha, the young man who was killed this morning, was an innocent civilian. However, the guy Abdul Hamid Khorasani, the one Emirati, whose video we just shared, he posted a statement earlier this morning where he said that the guy called Muhammad Agha was trying to plant a bomb, and when they tried to apprehend him, he shot back. So during the shooting, he was killed. That's the story of the government, but the people are saying no. He was an innocent civilian, and he was just killed for no particular reason. Now, in situations like this, what we need is independent journalists in Afghanistan who can go and investigate. Because, yes, on the one hand, the government says this, but the people say something else. We've had this over and over for the last 20 years. When the Americans and the previous government would kill people, the government would say, well, he was a Talib, he was a terrorist, and he was killed during a firefight. And then journalists wouldn't investigate it. Nobody would even dare to go there and find out what really happened. But the local people would say, these people were civilians, and they were not involved in any kind of militancy, but the government came and they killed them. So this has been a problem in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. Now that the regime has fallen, and now that we have a new government and roles have changed, now the people who were supporting the war on terror and the previous government, they are saying this guy was a civilian and the government is lying. So what should be our position in this situation? Our position should be the same as it was over the last 20 years. Just because the government says something, it doesn't mean that it is true. It is not the duty of us, the journalists, the commentators, and people in general, to just blindly accept whatever any government says, whether it's now the Taliban government or the previous government. That should be the standard position of any rational and reasonable person. So for this purpose, I think that, it's not sufficient to accept whatever the government is saying. Just because Abdul Hamid Khorasani says that Emirati says that this guy was planting a bomb and he shot back when we tried to arrest him, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the absolute truth and we shouldn't doubt it. Just like we didn't accept any statement by the previous government and the Americans and the British, who were all involved in a war in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. So I hope, that this issue is resolved and that we find out the truth about this matter. There are many independent media in Afghanistan still active, not entirely independent because they're all paid by the Americans, but there are others.
As independent as we can get. Right?
As independent as we can get, yes.
So what is next is, that is basically the news of the last couple of days or the last week. So we had the restrictions coming out on women, music, and beardless men. And we also have still some low level, for the time being, of unrest in Panjshir. And it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. Of course, like Sangar said, there does need to be an independent investigation and inquiry into what actually happened with this young man who lost his life, Muhammad Agha. because I actually believe, Sangar, that Bismillah Khan Mohammadi was seen by the Amu Darya, which functions as the border between Afghanistan and Tajikistan, a couple of days ago, before Abdul Hamid Emirati uploaded this video. So it'll be interesting to see what exactly happens. But with regard to turnout at this protest, I mean, from this one video that we saw by this vehicle, it seems to have been a couple of dozen of people, but it doesn't really take much to get people angry with things. And like Abdul Hamid himself said, people are hungry for a morsel of food. So if that is compounded with what is perceived to be injustice and extrajudicial killing, things can spiral out of hand. And yeah, I mean, you think you hit the nail on the head. It's not that difficult to be consistent. You don't accept what the government says just because of who the government is. There's always a different side to the story, and there's always a need for sort of a fact-checking mission and an impartial sort of investigation. And now we're going to go to some of the events of the last week. So for those of you who were not aware, we actually had a conference in Islamabad of the Organization of Islamic Countries, and the United Nations also agreed to make some exemptions to its sanctions on Afghanistan to allow the passage of humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. So Sanger link it's actually UN news, so they break it down pretty well and pretty simply.
Yes, here we go. Okay, so Security Council paves way for aid to reach desperate Afghans. So basically, they came up with a novel way of having sanctions imposed on Afghanistan while also allowing aid to enter the country. Can you elaborate on that, please?
So if you scroll down slightly, it actually explains. So it says humanitarian exemption. So I'll read through the article as we're showing it to everyone that's here watching. So it says Martin Griffiths, also Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, described the Council's passage of Resolution 2615, tabled by the United States as, quote, evidence of how seriously member states take the shocking levels of need and suffering in the country, unquote. So the humanitarian exemption, in passing the text, the council carved out exemption for humanitarian assistance and other activities from sanctions imposed under resolutions 2255 and 1988 concerning individuals and entities associated with the Taliban. The key provisions allow for the processing and payment of funds, other financial assets or economic resources, and provision of goods and services necessary to ensure the timely delivery of assistance. The Council strongly encouraged providers to use reasonable efforts to minimize the accrual of any benefits to entities or individuals designated on the sanctions list. Significantly, it requested the emergency relief coordinator to brief its members every 6 months and agree to review implementation of the resolution in a year's time. So according to Mark, so I'm scrolling down slightly here, but the general background here is the adoption follows months of discussions in the Council and broader international community following the country's takeover by the Taliban in August and subsequent freezing by Western countries of billions of dollars used up by the previous government to ensure the provision of basic services. According to Mr. Griffiths, humanitarian operations in Afghanistan are set to be the largest anywhere in the world in 2022, reaching some 22 million people. And this is some background to the previous the status quo under the previous regime. So the subheading is a bleak economic picture. Afghanistan ended 2020 with significant economic and development challenges. International partners pledged 13 billion in November 2020 over the following 4 years. However, the political change on the 15th of August 2021 ushered in new conditions. The international community's non-recognition of the Taliban, coupled with uncertainty arising from the divergence between official announcements and actions on the ground, led to a pause in international aid and the freezing of Afghan reserves held abroad. The UNDP stated that the drop in foreign aid that previously accounted for 40% of gross domestic product has had an immediate and significant impact on the economy. The report estimated that $2 billion will be needed to lift the incomes of all poor people up to the poverty line, and that is indicative of the relief required to avoid a humanitarian catastrophe of an unprecedented scale. So that is so it's good news in the sense that we have the United Nations finally actually acting to ensure the provision of basic aid services, foodstuffs, and the like, as well as easing some sort of some level of. So Michelle is asking for how long. So it's been agreed that there'll be biannual reviews. So, and yes, it's aid and humanitarian only. So anything that is perceived to enrich anyone associated with the government, that those sorts of activities will not go ahead. So we're still not at international recognition, but more so the recognition of the dire humanitarian situation on the ground. And that is good news to the extent that aid is coming in because people are suffering. But in the long term, Afghanistan needs a lot more than aid. We actually need the government recognized. And I was in a conversation with someone else the other day, and I said, look, the recognition of the government is not basically saying that Afghanistan becomes a superpower and Sirajuddin Haqqani becomes the Secretary General of the United Nations. When a country is recognized, it's able to represent itself at international forums, it's able to comply with international trading standards, and we can see some modicum of us being allowed to move beyond aid dependency. We had a government for the last 20 years that was internationally recognized, but it never had the appetite or the willingness to move beyond aid dependency because it was pocketing all of the aid. And now here, my contention for the recognition of the current government is this. You can agree or disagree with me. I may come back in a month, 6 months, a year's time and say, I was wrong. Taliban should not be recognized. But what I will say is this, is that if the previous regime was worthy of recognition, then the Taliban definitely are as well. If a government in which Qasim Fahim and Dostum and Bismillah Khan Mohammadi and Amrullah Saleh were in the driver's seat, if that is a government worthy of recognition, so is the Taliban. And if someone says, well, Sirajuddin Haqqani is on a terrorism list, and so are others. Yes, that's true. But the fact that the United States in the Doha Agreement showed some level of flexibility and willingness to countenance the idea of removing Sirajuddin Haqqani from the terrorism list, that indicates, in my view, that the terrorist and global terrorist label is something of a political tool that's meant to be punitive, that's applied, and when it loses its expediency, it also loses some of the potency that goes behind the label and the official designation.
That was also the case with Yasser Arafat and the PLO.
Exactly. So it's not unheard of for globally designated terrorists or terrorists to come back into the mainstream when their punishers find it expedient. And the United States, in signing the Doha Agreement, certainly found it expedient to say, yeah, we'll try to remove the Sirajuddin Haqqani from the terrorism list. That is all I have to say with regard to that. And now we're moving to the OIC conference on Afghanistan. I don't want to get too deep into that because there's one highlight that we're going to assess, right? But the OIC is a collection, an international organization, stands for the Organization of Islamic Countries, and its stated aims are to foster Muslim solidarity, cooperation, the strengthening of economic, political ties. And they met for an emergency session in Islamabad, Pakistan, in a conference that was convened by the Pakistani government.
Actually, it was initiated by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia initiated the conference, not Pakistan, but the Saudis told that the venue where this conference need to be held should be in Pakistan. Okay. So it's not like the Pakistanis organized the whole shebang. It was the Saudi government.
Thank you for the correction. So you had speeches from loads of different foreign ministers and even heads of government, including Imran Khan. You also had a speech by the Afghan foreign minister, Maulawi Amir Khan Muttaqi. So you had a variety of different speeches. But Imran Khan stole the show.
Yeah, should we play the Imran Khan video first or the Amir Khan Muttaqi video?
I'd say play the Amir Khan Muttaqi.
Okay, so can you maybe give a short introduction, and then while you're doing that, I will go and get the video.
So this is a speech given by Amir Khan Muttaqi in which he is basically arguing for the recognition of the new Afghan government on the basis of the fact that it has ensured peace and security and a centralized government in Afghanistan for the first time in 43 years. And to be fair, and with all due respect to people watching that may be in favor of what Amir Khan Muttaqi is saying, it's nothing new. But that is the strategy behind any sort of communication strategy, will emphasize and re-emphasize and center around certain points in order to drive home its message and the points of that message that it considers the most important. So the things that Amir Khan Muttaqi focuses on the most here is that we have peace in Afghanistan, a centralized government, no islands of power, as the Taliban like to say. We want good relations with the world, especially Islamic countries, and we want to be a hub for economic connectivity.
Okay. So
and he also actually addressed some of the propaganda which he feels his government has been exposed to and fake news.
Okay, so I'm going to play the video now.
دوی د افغانستان اوسنی تصویر په ډېر بد شکل نړۍ ته وړاندې کړي. حال دا چې د اګست 15مې له تحول وروسته افغانستان کې سرتاسري سوله راغلې او د هېچ اړوند د سیاسي او نورو ملحوظاتو پر بنا تهدید نه دی متوجه. له څه باندې 40 کاله بېثباتۍ او جګړې وروسته نن هر افغان کولی شي بې له ویرې او تهدید څخه په خپل وطن کې ژوند وکړي. واقعیت دا دی چې د افغانستان اسلامي امارت په راتګ سره 43 کلن جنګ ته د پای ټکی ایښودل شوی او 4 لسیزې وروسته په لومړي ځل جګړه وروسته تلفات صفر شوي. د افغانستان زندانونه په لومړي ځل د سیاسي بندیانو تش شوي دي. ټولې دولتي ادارې په کم وخت کې فعالې شوې او خدمات وړاندې کړي. د پخواني رژیم 15 ډکه مامورین د اسلامي امارت په مختلفو برخو کې د پخوا په شان خپلو دندو ته دوام ورکوي او له هېچا سره تبعیضي یا انتقامي چلند نه کېږي او نه شوی دی. اوسنی حکومت کې د هر قوم سمت او مذهب خلک ځان ویني او ژمن وي چې د لا پراختیا لپاره به د هر قوم او مذهب متخصصینو ته د کار کولو ښه زمینه برابره کړي. په افغانستان کې د فساد او زورواکو مخه په کلکه نیول شوې ده. اداري فساد، غصب، د ملي شتمنیو نه شخصي استفاده او د قدرت جزیرې له منځه تللي دي. افغانستان وروسته له څو لسیزو په لومړي ځل متحد او په ټول هېواد حاکم نظام لري. نوی حکومت چې په ټول هېواد بشپړ تسلط لري، د هېواد ټوله جغرافیه او ارضي تمامیت یې خوندي کړی امنیت یې تامین کړی او د نړۍ هېڅ هېواد ته خطر نه دی. د یو حاکم نظام په حیث حق لري چې نړۍ ورسره رسمي تعامل ولري او د نړیوالې ټولنې مسؤل غړی شي.
Okay, so that was the statement or the speech of Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi. And
okay, the Imran Khan statement aga YouTube video mi در واسطه ولا د څلورو دقیقو او 15 ثانیو څخه شروع که چې د هغې ځای څخه نیولی بیا دوی د نجونو د مکاتبو په اړه خبرې کوي.
سمه ده. Okay, so here we go. Now the speech of Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan.
And by the way, before we play the speech, I cannot overstate how controversial this part of his speech has been, how offended people have been, and what has been interpreted from the speech is that Imran Khan is saying, or allegedly saying, that it is Afghan culture for women to not be educated. And that interpretation has caused the storm. So now we're going to play the speech without talking, and everyone can derive their own interpretations.
Taliban foreign minister, he categorically said that they wanted to comply with these three conditions. Now, the point is, we must understand that when we talk about human rights, every society is different. Every society's idea of human rights and women's rights are different. I just give you an example of the Pakhtunkhwa province, which borders Afghanistan, because the culture is similar, because Taliban is basically predominantly a Pashtun movement, and there are more Pashtuns on our side of the border. Now, the city culture is completely different with the rural culture. Culture in Kabul was always different to rural areas. Just like in Peshawar, it is completely different, the culture, to the district adjoining the Afghanistan border. So I give you an example. We give stipends to the child's parents to put the girls into school. But in our tribal districts or the district adjoining Afghanistan, if we are not sensitive to the cultural norms of those people, even with stipends, they won't send the girls to school. But if we are sensitive to their cultural norms, without stipends, they're willing to send the girls to school. So this sensitivity, I'm afraid, when we are talking about human rights and women's rights, we have to be sensitive about this. But my big worry is that unless action is taken immediately, and I mean immediately, because we've been saying this for now 2-3 months, unless action is taken immediately, Afghanistan is heading for chaos. Any government, when it can't pay its salaries of its public servants, hospital, doctors, nurses, any government is going to collapse. But chaos suits no one. It certainly does not suit the United States. Because what if there's chaos there, and chaos means the inability, if the Afghan government does not have the ability to fight terrorism, and we know ISIL is now a threat. It has been a threat. We have had attacks from Afghan border, from ISIL into Pakistan. So the only way you can control and ISIL is capable of international terrorism. And the only reason you can deal with it is if there's a stable Afghan government. And same with Pakistan. Our worry is, and remember, Pakistan lost 80,000 people. We were the biggest collateral damage of the Afghan war. Our economy was shattered.
Okay, I think we've heard enough. Now he's going into, we suffered so much.
So, Sangar, I want to ask your view. Was Imran Khan suggesting that it is Afghan culture for women to be uneducated?
Absolutely not. Okay. The thing is that this is the problem. I said this on Twitter around same time that this whole controversy started. I said a lot of what people are saying is in reality just outrage for the sake of being outraged. You know, it's performative. It's all about being angry and saying this and that. Like, for example, even if Imran Khan says something really offensive and bad, like a while ago he said that Pashtuns are the most xenophobic people around the world, okay? This man, he is the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and he has a tendency to say things that he shouldn't say, that are offensive, and people are obviously people will respond to such statements. And I responded as well, and I said that Imran Khan shouldn't call Pashtun xenophobic. He doesn't know what xenophobia means, and it's offensive, and it's enforcing stereotypes about Pashtuns. But that was an actual statement that was wrong, okay? Here, he's saying that we should be sensitive to people's culture and norms, etc. I don't see any problem with that, because, to be honest...
And ultimately, he's talking... This guy was the chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so he's talking from experience.
Yes.
Right? He's talking about what actually happens or happened during his time as chief minister, that if we're not sensitive to people's cultural norms, some of them won't send their children to school. And if we are sensitive, they may not even ask for the stipends. They'll send their children to school anyway. What the hell is so offensive about that?
It's not offensive. In fact, this is very closely connected to Taliban telling people that they shouldn't listen to music and that they shouldn't shave their beards. You see, when the government wants people to do something, to behave in a certain way, like allowing their girls to go to school. If the government wants people to send their girls to school, they need to do it in a way that does not cause a backlash. Like, for instance, what the communists in Afghanistan did, or what Amanullah Khan did during his time, is basically trying to transform society from top down by expecting an entire country to adopt secular liberal norms from the West just like that. It doesn't make sense.
That sounds rather recent as well.
Yes. So that caused a backlash. That caused a problem, and we discussed this elaborately in the Amanullah Khan podcast. You guys can go and watch that. We also discussed this when we were talking about the communists, the Dawood Khan and Dr. Najib, and the Taliban are doing the same thing by going and telling people, oh, you should grow a beard, and women should do this, and taxi driver. This is a problem that many governments have had in Afghanistan in the past, and we have the same problem with the current government. So when Imran Khan is basically saying that we should be more sensitive to people's norms and culture when we want people to basically evolve and develop and progress and whatnot, he's being sensible. Okay?
You know what I find
he
the
makes
most ironic?
sense. Yes.
What I find the most ironic is that the people that are the most offended by this in Afghanistan, that are saying it's offensive to Afghan culture and norms, are the same people that were trying to implement alien culture on Afghanistan for the last 20 years. And
Exactly.
that's all I have to say.
Exactly. 100%. Yes. So in my opinion, the whole backlash was just performative. You know, oh, we are so opposed to Pakistan. Why are they saying this and that? how does the statement of Imran Khan affect situation in Afghanistan? First of all, people don't know that this OIC conference doesn't have that much power. The decision that was made by the United Nations to sort of weaken the sanctions on Afghanistan so that aid can be given to Afghanistan, that was a decision made by the United Nations, not the OIC. Okay? The OIC committed to giving aid to Afghanistan using the International Islamic Bank. How much money was that? Like a few $100 million? That's insignificant. There are Afghan businessmen who have committed more aid in the last 4 months to the people of Afghanistan than the entire OIC. So it's not such a significant or important venue, and Imran Khan is not really that important. Whatever he says, even if he's wrong, you know, it's just outrage for the sake of outrage. It doesn't really address any issues currently being like a concern for people in Afghanistan. Do girls need to be allowed to go to school? Yes, most certainly. Do the Taliban need to change their policies and come up with a transparent general policy for education? Most certainly they do. And this is what most people in Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan have been calling for. Imran Khan has no role to play in this whole issue. It doesn't really matter what he says.
However, on the topic of Pakistan, that is not all, because we have seen over the last week and a half, there have been clashes along the Durand line with regard to Pakistan's attempts at building this border fence. And I don't know how long this bloody border fence is taking. It's been going on for the last 7 years, and it's always, yes, brother, 90% complete. And then they come and they storm on Afghan land, and then they start building this crappy fence, and then fights ensue, and then people start calling each other names and whatever. So I'm going to say, before we get into this fence thing, I'll sangara the Khalid Zadran video meme درواسته ولا چه اغم play که my basic premise is this: Muslims should not be living with fences between them, especially when they are kinsmen or cousins or from the same tribe or from the same ethnicity. But Muslims should not be living with a fence between them. If the fence was to prevent the spilling over of war, the TTP, from Afghanistan into Pakistan, the war on terror is over, and the TTP, for all intents and purposes, now has strongholds within Pakistan itself. So even prior to the collapse of the previous regime and the change in government, attacks by the TTP were escalating. Now, I would say that is because of the flawed political military strategy employed by the Pakistani state against militancy in Waziristan, right?
We've discussed this at length in a live stream a couple of weeks ago. We have explained
a very good thumbnail.
Yes,
a very good thumbnail.
We explained why the Pakistani government, their political elite, and their media are in a constant state of denial. They do not accept that the TTP problem is a Pakistani problem in Pakistan, and as long as they don't change their own government's policies and their own attitude towards their own people, they will have militancy. Just like in Afghanistan, as long as we had the previous government, military occupation, everything, we would have a Taliban insurgency. That's a given. So if you are going to deny that and say, oh, all this problem is coming from Afghanistan, there is no problem in Pakistan, oh, everything is, this is just very childish. Okay, so let's play the video.
We recorded that live stream when the TTP and the Pakistani state signed a month-long ceasefire that is now, for all intents and purposes, over. The thumbnail was actually really good. We got like a really good picture of Imran Khan in his youth, like boy band kind of vibe. Next to him was Nurwali Masood. So in any case, if anyone wants to see that live stream, it's on our channel. And now here is a video that was uploaded by Khalid Zadran, and this is in Nangarhar. and it's footage of a Afghan commander or a Taliban commander shouting at the Pakistani troops not too far away. Now, Sangar, when you play the video, I actually can't hear it on this side. So if you just briefly translate what's going on.
Okay. Allahu Akbar, Mark to Pakistan. Allah is great and death to Pakistan.
I would suggest just playing the whole thing
Yeah.
and then briefly translating at the end.
هغه خبرې به کېږي خو تا له وایم چې کته امتیاز هم راونه کړي ګوره او دلته دله خطه شوم ګوره چې قدم دې کېښودو قسم د هغه په هغه ذات مې دې قسم وي چې ما دله وویله ګوره موږ ستا د جنګ لپاره دومره خوشحالېږو لکه د یهودو جنګ له زه به راځم خو ته به نه راځې دا ځای زمونږ دی ته به دلته نه راکېوځې له هغه ځای نه صحیح ده.
Okay, so the guy who was...
So he basically shouted saying, you will not even come and urinate over here. And that, you know, you stay there, we stay here, but if you come over here, we are more happy to fight you than we are happy to fight the Jews, which is not very tolerant. But that is basically the oh, and he also said the Stas Saramudere Sab Party Day, which is we have a lot to account for with you, meaning that you've basically we have revenge to exact upon you. And he's speaking to the Pakistan army. Now it's worthy of saying that mid to lower level Taliban commanders and fighters do have a massive grudge against Pakistan because they feel that Pakistan exploited them and arrested them and arrested their leaders and so on and so forth. So they do feel that Pakistan did betray them and exploit them, which is why he is so angry. That is a sentiment that isn't exclusive to this one commander. It's to some extent, we could say, widespread. But here, that's the thing. The place in which the Afghan commander is standing is filled with other Afghan commanders as well. Now, obviously, they're not standing in Pakistan, right? Because if they were standing in Pakistan, they probably wouldn't be at liberty to record the entire video and to shout and scream. So what's happening, and what I suspect is that in creating this fence, and this is perfectly rational to some extent, is that the Pakistanis are coming and trying to build this fence along terrain that is the most favorable to the construction of this fence. And whilst that has caused clashes before, the Taliban or the commanders right now are very blunt in saying that you will not come here and construct this fence. And in all honesty, I stated my default position before. Muslims, especially Muslims of the same ethnicity, should not be living with massive fences between them. But if General Bajwa is so keen on building this fence, maybe he could just build it 500 meters interior of the border of the Durand line and build it on Pakistani
border.
soil.
You said border. You just said border. So you
know,
recognize the Durand line. Ha, 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 ha.
ISI. But this is the.
So
is
you
the
said
thing.
border.
This is the thing.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
It's very easy to fix this problem if he's so keen on the fence. He could just do it this way. So this kind of stuff, unfortunately, is so unnecessary because you're not going to be able to garrison the entirety of the fence in the first place. But even if you are, avoid the optics. Build it on your own side.
Yeah, and see, the thing is, here at the AFGHANEYE, we are different than most Afghans who talk about Afghanistan-Pakistan relations. We believe that, you know, Pakistanis are entitled to have their own views and opinions. This has been explained at length in the article about the Durand Line written by Ahmed-waleed Kakar. I recommend everyone to go read that article. We have had several Pakistanis on this show. We talked to Amina Khan, who is a strategic advisor to the Pakistani government. We had here Pakistani amateur historian, what's his name? He was one of our first guests.
Sayyid Ibrahim.
No. Nasif Rahman.
Okay.
We had
Nafis
him,
Rahman.
Nafis Rahman. And we had many people who are from the other side of the Durand line, and then they believe in the legitimacy of this so-called international border. We are willing to exchange ideas and views with Pakistanis, and they're welcome to talk with us. We exchange views and ideas. But what I do not tolerate, absolutely not, is dishonesty. And dishonesty from the Pakistani side when they say, we are not crossing over the Durand line. We have had consistently reports from various sources from Afghanistan, independent journalists, eyewitnesses. They are all saying that the Pakistani forces are going over the Durand line into the Afghan territory and building a fence. That's the problem, and this is why there are skirmishes. The Pakistanis are using the whole TTP threat as a pretext to build a fence according to their own wishes and desires. First of all, if you're saying this is an international border that needs to be respected, so the Pakistanis are not respecting it by going across that border that they wish to impose into Afghan territory and building a fence. That's the first violation. The second thing is, so they're being dishonest. They're being deceptive by saying that. So if you are going to do that, you cannot expect any kind of understanding and compassion from people from Afghanistan. We will say, okay, on the one hand, you do not agree with us that this border, whatever you want to impose, that you do not accept our view on this matter. But on the other hand, you're also going across the Durand line and building a fence. So basically, the Pakistani authorities are here at fault 100%. Whether it's the previous government in Afghanistan or the Taliban government, doesn't matter. It's their problem. It's the Pakistanis' fault.
Okay. There's one point I want to make here, but then I'm just going to push back on you. Not because I disagree with what you're saying, but because if we agree with each other, then the discussion is better with some disagreement. So we were told, with some level of accuracy, by the way, I'm not saying that this part was a lie, that there were all of these Indian consulates in Afghanistan that were promoting terrorism against Pakistan. One of the reasons for this fence being built, fine. But now there are no Indian consulates, right? The Afghan Taliban have removed all of those consulates. So that isn't a factor. The TTP are still a factor, which means that you kind of have to acknowledge now that, damn, yes, the TTP were not an Indian proxy. Right? Because they're managing to survive and attack the Pakistani state without those consulates. But here's the thing, Stangad. Let's have a bit of an exchange on this, okay? According to the Doha Agreement, the Taliban would not allow the soil of Afghanistan to be used to attack another country, okay? Now, according to reports, the TTP are active in Afghanistan, and to what extent they act as the TTP in Afghanistan is subject to debate, because some of them have just fought alongside Afghan Emiratis. But now, in Kunar specifically, across the Durand line lies Bajawar, and in Bajawar, 2 Pakistani troops were killed by TTP snipers, which is why we are told that this bout of fighting was triggered in these skirmishes. Now, is the Afghan government not at fault here?
I to be honest, I don't really buy the story that they sniped 2 TTP guys in Kunar.
No, they sniped the TTP from Kunar.
Yeah.
Sniped 2 Pakistani army guys across the line
from
Bajawar.
Afghanistan.
From Afghanistan.
Really? And
Apparently
what
so,
is
yeah.
the source of this story?
I forgot. But you remember your tweet where you were like, the Afghans retaliated against Pakistani shelling.
Yes.
There was a guy, his name is Talha Ahmed. He's like a security analyst, and he basically quoted, and it was a report from one of these blue tickers saying that from the day before, saying that the TTP sniped 2 Pakistani soldiers.
Aha. Okay. Well, if let's just entertain that idea. Let's say it's true. The TTP fired a weapon and struck people on the other side of the Durand line.
Not people, Pakistani troops.
Yes, Pakistani troops. Okay, so which is an act of
Sorry,
war.
I thought it was worthy to distinguish.
Yeah. So it was an act of war. Okay, so the logical step would be that the Pakistanis address the Afghan authorities first by saying there is cross-border attack. But they don't. They just start shelling, okay? So when they start shelling, what do you expect from the Afghan side? That they are going to just watch and sit and look? You know, it's like...
Well, okay, but then could it not be said that this is something that the authorities in Kabul should know and do know that Pakistan is sensitive about? And Pakistan has raised this issue quite a few times, primarily behind closed doors. So it's not something that the Afghan authorities have no idea that the TTP are operating in Kunar.
And likewise, we can also argue that the Afghan authorities have facilitated a ceasefire and negotiations with the TTP. So what else do the Pakistanis want? Like, if Pakistanis need the mediation of the Afghan Minister of Interior, Sirajuddin Haqqani, to basically facilitate a ceasefire and a negotiation between the TTP and the Pakistani government, you know, that's more than anybody else can do for you. So the Pakistanis should be very grateful, and the fact that they fail to reach some kind of agreement with the TTP, it's the TTP and the Pakistanis' problem. So they're making their problem our problem in Afghanistan. That's basically it. They should.
Okay. Let's say. What if we say the Afghan authorities are making it our problem by having the TTP within Afghanistan?
How?
We have the TTP in Afghanistan right now with the acquiescence of our current government. Are we not making their problem ours by virtue of giving one side refuge?
Yes, okay, that's a fair point. So if the Afghan government expels the TTP and sends them all to Pakistan, how would that work? They would just go
that
and
would have massive
put bags on their heads, tie them up, and sell them for $5,000 to the Pakistanis, just like the Pakistanis sold the Taliban. I don't think that's going to happen.
It's not. No, it's not. But you know, I just thought it was it would be useful to have a back and forth. But I've always said that the government basically snaking the TTP would be a massive blemish on the government's credentials, obviously, and this is worthy of saying. A lot of people were like to me, it's good that the government is engaged in these skirmishes with the Pakistani army, because it shows people that they're not Pakistani puppets. And I went on Twitter and I sent like half a dozen tweets of people saying, this is all staged. They're doing this to psyop. They're doing this to basically try to show people that they're not Pakistani puppets. So the point I'm making is that there is a certain demographic within Afghan society who General Bajwa and the Amir could kill each other and they would say it's staged. Right? So you're not going to convince them. They're almost as convinced in the Taliban being Pakistani stooges as they are in the Quran. That's how convinced they are. You can't change. But then I was like, look, you're not going to change their mind. But within Afghanistan as well, you have the more religious perspective. And if the government started handing over the TTP to Pakistan, a lot of its own base would start to question it. Like, these guys are fighting for an Islamic system in Pakistan. How could we just hand them over? What is the difference between us and General Musharraf, right? So it's not as easy as some across the Durand line think it is when it comes to the TTP, the triangle of the TTP, the Islamic Emirate, and Pakistan. So that is essentially, I think, where's our chat? Oh, and I just found it interesting how some Indian outlets covered.
Before we go to the Indian outlets, just to go back to the official position of the AFGHANEYE with regards to these issues, we have been arguing in favor of negotiations in Afghanistan for the last 2 years. Okay? Even before that, before we launched AFGHANEYE, we were in favor of negotiations. Not because negotiations just sound so cuddly and whatever. The fact is that most of these conflicts in these regions do not have a military solution. You cannot exterminate and kill all Taliban in Afghanistan. The Americans tried that for 20 years. They failed. The Pakistanis cannot exterminate and kill all Taliban in Pakistan. They tried and failed. In fact, not even just Taliban, they have now this Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan movement. They are not from the tribal area. They are from Karachi and Lahore and Pindi and those areas. The Pakistani government is simply not capable of exterminating all its opposition groups, the militant religious opposition groups. So the only solution is for the secular, liberal and progressive and whatnot Pakistanis and the conservative Pakistanis to talk and reach some kind of agreement that suits them all and they can have peace and stability in Pakistan. We wanted to have that in Afghanistan as well, but as we have learned from all these recent events, we've been saying this all along, but now even Western media is testifying that this is the case. The Afghan government never wanted peace and they never wanted to negotiate with the Taliban because they wanted to stay in power forever. And they failed, and that has resulted into a regime change in Afghanistan. Now, our position is that there needs to be a rational and sensible way to reach an agreement where all sides can live in peace with each other. There needs to be a solution, and that solution exists. It's possible. I'm optimistic that it is going to happen, but all sides need to be committed to long-term peace and stability in the region. As long as that's not the case, the people on the government saying, no, this is Taliban, terrorists, TTP, they're Indian stooges, whatever, and the TTP say, you kafir, this, blah, blah, blah. So it's not solving anything. So our position is you guys need to talk and reach some sort of agreement and make peace. We tried that in Afghanistan. We failed. Whatever. We have a different government, but there's at least stability and peace. We don't want any disturbance, any instability in Pakistan because it directly affects us. We depend on security.
And because we're nice people, we don't want other people to suffer.
And I want to continue eating mangoes.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think that's all issues covered.
Yes. Last point that you wanted to cover was Indian media.
Oh, yeah. No, I just to be fair,
Sure. My interview is cancelled today.
Okay, good.
Okay, so Republic World. Indian. What's this silly ads here? Okay, so let's go to.
So this is an Indian outlet, and if you scroll down, they are quoting someone here. And they're actually quoting their own executive editor, who is called Abhishek Kapoor. So Abhishek Kapoor is saying both Pakistan and the Taliban are having a face-off in regard to the Durand
Wait,
line.
just 1 second. Which paragraph is that?
Bold or italic.
Oh, this Indian website is really disturbing. Like all this ads. Okay, so the
yeah, there we go. So no, what's up, Porta?
Going up? Load up on a platform that's never down.
And in depth. What the hell? What is this?
No, a link كبرت خلاص كه دوا paragraph دي أول paragraph bold or italic.
There was very loud, annoying music coming from that Indian website. You know, this raw agents were sabotaging our live stream with their. Okay, so
here we have a passage from Republic World's executive editor Abhishek Kapoor. Both Pakistan and the Taliban are having a face-off in regard to the Durand Line, which forms the border between the two countries. It began yesterday afternoon after Pakistani troops or forces fired artillery. It was in response to Taliban operatives removing the fencing along the Durand Line. The Taliban do not believe in the sanctity of the Durand Line and believe in Greater Afghanistan, which extends far beyond the border. There is the general sense in Afghanistan and in the Taliban that, you know, this line and this fence is not really where Afghanistan ends. It ends sort of at some other point, but that doesn't really motivate policy and is not translated into active policy and actions. It's just a vague sort of statement that's held that one point territories on the other side of the Durand Line were ours. So I think Abhishek Kapoor is rather overblowing the Durand Line issue here. It is, as we said, in response to fencing, and it is in response to the shelling. And the fencing obviously doesn't take the form of, it's not like Pakistani troops are at Lendi Kotel and they're like, we're going to start fencing from here, and the Taliban say, no, don't you dare. No, they intrude onto territory in which Afghans are there, people are hurt, they build this fence, and from that point on, the area on the other side is called Pakistan, and you need a visa to get in. It's not really how it works. And yeah, that's about all I wanted to say with regard to that. Sangar, we received a super chat from Michelle, $9.99. Thank you very much, Michelle. Really appreciate it. I'm glad you've been with us throughout the entirety of this live stream. And JZ has donated $1.99 saying, Musa Shafiq podcast, please. JZ, you know, I was thinking about the Musa Shafiq podcast like a couple of days ago and even months ago. And the thing is that with the way in which events of Afghanistan have changed so much, Sangar and I had a plan of action for 2021. And we achieved about half of it. And the other half of it, we had to totally postpone because the previous regime collapsed. And to some extent, our work changed to also sort of giving weekly wrap-ups of the latest news coming out of Afghanistan. During the days of the regime's collapse, we were live streaming every day for like 3 hours. So the point I'm making is that the Musa Shafiq podcast is, you know, in our line of vision. We haven't forgotten it, but it's just that for this rather crucial moment of Afghan history, we've sort of had to reprioritize some of our different objectives in order to better cater to what is a largely expanded audience, as well as a totally different reality within Afghanistan. And yeah, that's basically about زه بل شيء د ویلو نه لرم سنګر
Okay.
که دوی پښتنې لري ودی کی او کنه دلته به ختم کو.
Samara.
Guys, we've wrapped up, so that is all for the last week and a half. We won't be live streaming for the next 8 or so days, which is why it was of paramount importance that we live stream today to give a wrap up of everything that's happened, as well as to, you know, not disappear for 2 to 3 weeks. So if anyone has any questions, now is the time to ask them. If not, Sangar and I will be heading out.
Yeah, so guys, if you have any questions, you can pose it now. We have a couple of minutes. Yeah, so while we won't be live streaming, there will be a podcast that will be published soon. We will also have, how is your fundraising going for your trip? Have you met your target? Good question. We have obtained the equipment to record videos. So that's a significant part of the money that we were trying to raise. So we have the equipment. You can go and visit our website and you can see which equipment we have already purchased. What still remains a challenge for us, that is to get enough money so that we can pay for the expenses, travel expenses. But we are currently working on a plan to make that possible. So for the time being, we are still working behind the scenes in order to facilitate all of that. But as soon as we have more updates, we will notify you. We will publish updates on social media, on our website, and talk about it in a live stream. So bear with us. But the plan is 100% going to be implemented. We are going to Afghanistan, inshallah. We are going to shoot a documentary. We are going to do that not just once. This is all just the first step. We will do that regularly. So we will go to Afghanistan regularly to shoot, record, report, make documentaries, videos, photography, all of that. So bear with us. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much for the super chat, by the way, HSC. Vlad is saying, how widespread is Urdu in Afghanistan? Not at all. Urdu is not a native language to Afghanistan. A lot of people do know Urdu, primarily either because they have relatives who have lived in Pakistan, or they have lived in Pakistan, or because of the most famous Ustad of Urdu in the modern world. His name is Shah Rukh Khan. So yeah, they know it because of that, but it's not a native language. Wafi Self Shankar is saying, I've been waiting for this opportunity. I really hope you can answer this, even if it's just a short answer. But you haven't asked the question. Okay. Amjad Yusuf is saying, have you made a podcast on Abdurrahman? We've spoken about Abdurrahman at different junctures. However, it is my plan to talk about Abdurrahman in an exhaustive podcast, Sangar. So I hope you're ready to basically, separate fact from reality as far as his role in Afghanistan goes. Abu Bakr Ahmad is saying, is it true that Jalaluddin Haqqani served as a moderating figure during the civil war? Yes, he did. And then he joined the Taliban. Okay, so Wafi Sungkar has asked this question. According to Matthew, a former US Marine in Afghanistan, the number of Pashtun soldiers in the Afghan army never made up more than 3% of the Afghan army. Is this claim true? Thank you from Indonesia. So what I do know, and we covered this.
By the way, Matthew is a friend. He's going to be, inshallah, on our podcast in near future. I will send him an invitation. He's a great guy. Yeah, please continue.
So at some point, I do believe that this was true, because the Afghan army, or the regime's army following 2001, was basically a reorganized group of militias from Shura-e-Nizar that became the army. If you're more interested, I also quoted a lot of statistics in our live stream on 20 years of war in Afghanistan, where we spoke exhaustively about the way in which the regime was created in Afghanistan after 2001. So it's called 20 years after 9/11, I believe. So Wafi Sunkar, if you want, you can watch that video. But as the years went on, especially under Ashraf Ghani's regime, the amount of Pashtuns, specifically from the eastern provinces, did increase in the Afghan army. So I wouldn't make the claim that only 3% of the Afghan army were Pashtuns. MS is asking, I watched one of your older videos recently, and I have the answer to your question. How can the Taliban forgive when Allah cannot forgive? This was a question you guys had with Wardak Saib. Okay, yeah, I remember that. Omar is asking, what do you think? Pakhtunkhwa will get separate from Pakistan? No, I don't think that. Bin Said, okay. MS is saying the premise is incorrect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can forgive. There are no limits on it. The only people outside the scope of mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the people who died as mushriks or polytheists. Yes, however, I believe what Habib Wardak was getting at is we have a saying in Pashto, Khuday ta'ala khpal banda bakhshi, khud khpal banda haq na bakhshi. Okay? So unless one human does not forgive, if one human is transgressed by another and does not forgive the other, right, then Allah will not forgive him on the basis of the one who has been transgressed against.
Yes, because there is Haqqullah and Haqqul Abd. The difference is
Haqqullah and Haqqul Ibad. So that is what. So Habib Wardak was not saying that Allah will not forgive people. What he's saying is that if people don't forgive those who oppress them, then Allah will also, in light of that, will not extend his forgiveness to them. وَمِنَ اللَّهِ تَوْفِيقٌ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. That's, I'm not going to get into the aqidah of it. Ihsan Hafiz is asking you, Sangar, do you speak Urdu?
Well, obviously, I understand Urdu, because basically Urdu is very accessible for people who speak Pashto, Dari, and understand some Arabic. I spent some time with Jamaat Tabligh in UK, so that's why Tora Urdu aata hai.
Okay. Ahmad, are there still Zoroastrians in Afghanistan, or Baha'i or Ahmadis? There are no Ahmadis. As far as I'm aware, there are no Baha'i. And as far as I'm aware, there are no Zoroastrians.
There are a small minority of Baha'is and Ahmadis who came, or basically in the last 20 years, some NGOs, some of their staff and etc. Were proselytizing people to Baha'ism and Qadianism in Afghanistan. I am aware that there was a minority of people in some parts of the country who converted to those other religions. But it is something that is a recent development of the last 20 years. Like historically, the Qadianis and the Baha'is never really had a foothold in Afghanistan because it was basically banned.
Are there Zoroastrian? You may see a certain Zoroastrian rooted traditions being celebrated in Afghanistan. You may even see some Afghans wearing the Zoroastrian sort of eagle necklace, but that is more of a recent phenomenon because as sort of an attempt to cultivate more secular leaning Persian-esque kind of nationalism. But are there a native community of Zardashtis?
No. There are some Afghans who have recently converted to Zoroastrianism, and one person in particular that I know His parents were both from the Communist Party in Afghanistan. They were
Imagine my surprise.
and they were Tajik ethno-nationalists.
Imagine my surprise.
And after migrating to Europe and settling here as refugees, this young person has converted to Zoroastrianism. And basically, the whole concept of being Zoroastrian for that particular person, who I've debated at length for several years, is essentially the Arabs came, oppressed us. Arab religion is Arab imperialism, so that's why I return back to the religion of my ancestors, which is Zoroastrianism. But this person had a very secular, liberal, progressive 21st century interpretation of Zoroastrianism. So every aspect of Zoroastrianism which conflicted with Western secular liberalism, he was opposed to that. So yeah, those are the Afghan Zoroastrians, a few that exist. That's basically that kind of people.
Sure. Yeah. What would happen to the Afghans that converted to other sects of Islam or even left Islam as a whole? I'm just curious. I think you should probably ask the Ministry of Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, but I'm not sure that at the time, for the time being, the Taliban are implementing the laws of apostasy. You right, mate, is asking, is racism anything to do with the sentiment between Afghanistan and Pakistanis? Absolutely, yes. MS is saying, you guys do great work. If you're ever in the US, we need to get together for Bandar and play some Manfi Manpi, inshallah. Bint Said is saying, I'm from Abbottabad, KPK. Was that part of Afghanistan before partition? Does anyone know? No, it wasn't. Abbottabad was actually named after the general, the British general who ruled as governor of, I think his name was General Abbott, right? And he really loved the actual environment, so they named it after him. But it fell out of Afghan control, I'd say, in the early 1800s. And I don't think we have any other questions saying that. So
the thing is, Bint Said, Abbottabad is on the other side of the Indus River. So
no, I actually think it's on this side, but just very close.
No, it's
in KPK.
Yes, but it is on the other side of yes.
I don't think it is.
Are we going to have a Parwan Panjshir and Kapisat debate again? I have the map in front of me. Okay, let's settle this now.
Is it east of Artak?
Yes, it is.
Are you sure?
Okay, yes, it is east of Artak. Okay,
Mr.
Yeah, Geography, now we will settle this.
It is. Yeah.
Here is the Indus River, and here is Abbottabad. Okay.
Yeah. My bad. But yeah.
Revenge. Here is it.
Omar is asking, was Khaybar part of Afghanistan? It was until 1879, 1880-ish. But it wasn't really in direct control of the Emir in Kabul, but rather he ruled through local sort of tribal elders that were to differing levels subservient with him. Is TTP and Afghan Taliban the same thing? I would recommend you watch our live stream on the TTP, and I think Sangar Baspamovi.
Yes. Guys, thank you very much. May Allah bless you all. Thank you for being with us again for another AFGHANEYE Live. We will be back next year in 2022. We will publish a podcast in the next few days, and we will also publish an article maybe.
Actually, there's another thing just before we wrap up. We've got like 50 plus people watching right now and only 45 likes, which is not just upsetting, but I feel like as the fountains of knowledge and wisdom that Sangar and I are, is, you know, it's not sufficient. So please don't just like the video, but also share it on your social media handles. And yeah, tell a friend to tell a friend. We will see you, inshallah ta'ala, in 2022. And we pray that everyone, including those that do celebrate Christmas, has a good couple of years until we see you again. A good couple of days until we see you again.
Don't eat too much, guys. Don't eat too much during the holidays, because you will get fat, and then in January you will regret it. So be careful with what you eat, and have a good night, evening. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.